everyone. Welcome to Jasper Collins's Insight series, Charged Up. I'm your host, Janine Collins, and I do have a very special guest today. We have Rupert Tull de Salis. Hi, welcome.
Thank you. Major risks to EV success are not motor-related, but then I'll move on to the ones that are motor-related. The major risks involve, first of all, looking at the history of the success of any environmentally friendly transport technology. It is actually directly related to political factors in each market country. So, for example, the progression of CAFE fuel economy standards correlates directly to whether you have a Democrat or Republican terms in office in this country. And the miniature Japanese K cars that are not very familiar necessarily in the West are a very special vehicle which purely existed because the Japanese government carved out a special loophole to encourage that size of vehicle. So the strongest factor by far in the technology of this kind is the political climate and the reaction to it in the regulatory environment. Having said that, now the EVs as a vehicle to the customer, they present a very attractive proposition, except for two items, as well known. One of them is the perception of charging convenience, and the other one is the perception of repair costs. However, in respect to the motor and how this affects these particular risks, the very first one, and you mentioned this earlier, is fragile supply chains. Now, in particular, magnets, which make up about 1/3 of the cost of an electric motor for traction for a vehicle, they are heavily dependent on China, for reasons which I can go into further. Secondly, there's another commodity that has potentially a fragile supply chain, which is electrical steel, which makes up the laminations, which make up perhaps another third of the cost of the motor. Electrical steel is available worldwide, but the capacity for creating electrical steel requires extremely expensive steel mill equipment, which takes a long time to gear up. So if there were to be a significant uptick in the growth rate of electric vehicles, then we might run quickly into the capacity problem of electrical steel, and it might take quite a lot of time and effort to kind of spend our way out of that and increase that capacity. And then the third risk factor, which is motor related but I think also spreads to the rest of the vehicle, is the immature design technologies, relatively speaking, that there are in the electric traction motor field right now. Internal combustion engine vehicles have had well over a century to consolidate and mature and really establish the best ways of doing most everything that you have to do, along with sort of a steady pace of innovation for emissions and so on. But the actual design optimization of the traction motor and the surrounding electric vehicle system is very time consuming, surprisingly so. People know electric motors or believe electric motor systems to be simpler and somehow less complex and perhaps therefore easier than internal combustion engine powertrains. And there is some truth in this. If you count the number of parts in an EV, you'll certainly come up with that conclusion and say, oh, look, there's much less parts. If you consider the amount of maintenance that an EV needs, yes, you look at that and say, yes, look, that's way less than an internal combustion engine. This is surely better and easier. However, the actual optimization in designing an EV, the motor and the surrounding, the inverter, the battery and so on, is remarkably interdependent and complicated, because you change one piece of that and you almost always end up changing all the rest of it as well. So the task of simulating and predicting how to do that is surprisingly slow. Despite all the modern technologies of simulation, artificial intelligence, you name it, it still takes weeks to make changes when you're going through this process. And this translates into a delay risk and production delay risk in the end, and even quality risk for these technologies. So there's definitely some risks there as we sort of move forward and try and make these systems better and better and better, to run into significant pitfalls where a vehicle simply doesn't get to market in time because of quite unexpected optimization difficulties on the way.
Thank you so much for joining us here today in this conversation. It's been really enlightening.